Welcome to my channel, Outspoken Samantha. If you are new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you're returning, welcome back. I do appreciate your support. On my channel, I like to give my opinion and perspective on things that are happening today, things that I think actually matter to everyday people, especially those of us trying to raise kids in the insanity known as today's society. I do like to talk about politics and current events, and my perspective does tend to be more on the conservative side of things. Please like this video, leave a comment below, and also share it with others. Help me to grow this channel and hopefully reach more people that value logic, reason, and sanity. Also, be sure to find me on Rumble under Outspoken Samantha in the event that YouTube decides I have violated their community standards and chooses to kick me off their platform forever. That being said, let's get into today's topic. All right, guys, I've had all day to kind of think about this, to kind of see a lot of the reactions coming in about the midterm elections last night, see a lot of the feedback, some of the comments being made, and just kind of get a better feel for the tone of, especially the GOP right now, the Republican Party, kind of where people are at. And I think there are a lot of points being missed as to why what happened last night happened, why we did not see this red wave that we were expecting. And I think, there's this opportunity right now that we need to have kind of a come to Jesus moment here, that we really need to come to terms with where we are at as a country and as a society. And I think, a lot of things that we need to open our eyes to in order to effectively move forward. There's a lot of blame being thrown around about why this red wave didn't happen. People are blaming Mitch McConnell, people are blaming Trump, and then there are those that are just blaming the entire GOP in general, saying that we just managed to screw things up again and that we just failed miserably as a party, and just a lot of things that are just not super helpful. Blame looks terrible on the left and it looks even worse on the right. So we have got to stop blaming people, stop pointing fingers, because as we see from the left on a consistent basis, it doesn't get anything done. What we need to do is really figure out why it happened. And I have a few thoughts about that. I know I made a shorter video earlier today. Well, depending on when I post this video, either today or yesterday, kind of just some very quick thoughts on it, but I have a lot of deeper insights. I haven't really heard anybody else talk about these things. There's a lot of things that I kind of scripted out in my computer that sits behind me. So if you see me looking this way, that's why I have my computer behind me to make notes. Things that I kind of wrote down that I haven't heard anybody else talk about that I really think are important to touch on. So we do have to go back just a little bit. I know I've talked about in the past how I ran for office in 2020. And I think I learned a lot of things from that experience that I still think, not that I know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that I learned a lot of valuable lessons there that I think would be helpful to other people, that I don't hear a lot of people on the right talk about, whether it be commentators or political candidates or whatever. This is just my perspective. When I ran for office in 2020, I feel like one of the biggest hurdles that we face as Republicans is the fact that Democrats have always been better at messaging. They just are. I would argue that it's because they're also more comfortable with being deceptive, with cherry picking little sound bites, cherry picking things out of an issue that, if they pull this particular sentence or comment out of an issue and just say that, like on its face, it might be true, but if it were put into the actual context that they mean it, that that it would actually end up being completely false. But they're really good at doing that, and also in a way that pulls at people's emotions and heartstrings. They're really much more effective at appealing to people's emotions and appealing to their humanity, but at the same time, people are being lied to. So it's kind of gross. But for example, the White House posted just maybe like a week ago or a few days ago. So I'll just share a couple of examples with you as to what I mean by this. Just like cherry picking things out of an issue to make it sound really good, to make themselves sound really good, that they really care and that they're really fighting for the people, but put in actual context, they're really just dirtbags. For example, the White House posted, quote, "We lost over 180,000 manufacturing jobs under the last guy. We've created 700,000 manufacturing jobs on my watch," end quote. But when fact checked, it was pointed out that this statement is conflating regaining all of the lost jobs that were closed during the pandemic and when everybody had to shut down, and reopening those same jobs versus actually creating 700,000 jobs that didn't exist before. So it sounds like, fighting for the people, getting the economy up and running, getting jobs open and creating opportunity for people, when in reality, it's just the fact that, they're finally lifting people out from under their thumb and actually letting people go back to work. Another example, the White House recently posted that, quote, "Seniors are getting the biggest increase in their Social Security checks in 10 years through President Biden's leadership," end quote. But when fact-checked, it was pointed out that the seniors will receive a large Social Security benefit increase due to the annual cost of living adjustment, which is based on the inflation rate. President Nixon in 1972 signed into law automatic benefit adjustments tied to the Consumer Price Index. So while it sounds like, they're really fighting for senior citizens and they're really trying to take care of them and they really just love the old people, despite the fact that they put them in, all of the COVID infected patients into nursing homes and killed everybody's grandma and grandpa, let's just forget about that. They now love all of the old people. And that's what it really sounds like on its face, that they care so much. But honestly, if you actually look at it in reality, in the true context of things, the only reason senior citizens are getting this large increase is because inflation, it's directly tied to inflation, and inflation is at a 40-50 year high. So it's really not a flex. Actually, that increase is a direct demonstration of how bad inflation is. So, but again, you have to be looking for, okay, what is it what they really mean? Are they as wonderful as they're making themselves sound, or are they really just pulling out these little sentences that they can say that are true on its face, but you really have to dig into them to see exactly what they mean. For me, it's like when Karine Jean-Pierre says that the president has taken unprecedented action to close the southern border and provided unprecedented historic funding to the southern, or not to the southern border, she says to the border. In my opinion, and this has not been fact-checked, this is just according to me. In my opinion, she's referring to the Ukraine border, providing historic funding to the Ukraine border. So she can say the president has provided unprecedented funding to the border, and that it's the most secure border, and he's taking all this action, but it's to which border? Which border are you talking about? So you have to really think about, with their messaging, it sounds wonderful, but in reality, a lot of times it's just blatantly false on its face. But with the GOP, I think the reason that we struggle with messaging is because we're not looking to tug at people's heartstrings. We have always relied on reality, on logic, on facts, on policy, and we've largely relied on people just being able to see what's happening right in front of their faces. We always expect people to vote based on, how their, what's it called? Living conditions. I can't think of the phrase quality of life, quality of living, how that is going for them, how safe do they feel, how many jobs are available, what do their paychecks look like, can they support their families? We just expect people to look at these things, and that when they're succeeding and thriving, or the opposite, that they'll vote accordingly based on what's actually happening. That if they see their communities failing, or that jobs are hard to find, or that their streets are filthy and unsafe, or that they can't afford food and gas, or that they see direct threats to their kids in the form of drugs and sexualization, or any number of issues that should not be partisan or political whatsoever, that we don't need to come up with pretty messages that are tied up in a bow into digestible little morsels for people, that we just assume people are going to see with their own eyes and use their logic and critical thinking skills and understand that they, if things are not going well, that the power is with them to turn things around, that they have the power to say, my community sucks right now. I'm going to vote for somebody else because clearly what's happening is not working, and I'm going to turn things around. That's the beauty of our system of government, that the power completely lies in your hands to say, I have the opportunity to turn things around, so I will. And we always assume that people are going to do that. We just always assume people are reasonable, and I think we're to a point where we need to stop assuming that. And this is going to sound terrible, but I always criticize Democrats for talking to people like we're stupid, like we're so much dumber than what we are. By the same token, I'm starting to think that Republicans talk to people like they're smarter than they are. Not even so much smarter, but more informed and more in tune than they are. I will give you a minute to just chew on that for a second, be offended for a second, but let's take a minute and come to terms with if what I said is true. Let's go back in time a little bit. So we spent 3 years of the Trump presidency listening to the mainstream media lie about the Russian hoax collusion. We had Adam Schiff going on CNN and saying that he had irrefutable evidence that Trump was guilty and that they had evidence of this collusion. We had Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Jerry Nadler, all singing the praises of Russian collusion, that they were going to get Trump on this, that they had all of this evidence. Turned out to be nothing. In fact, turns out that the whole thing was bought and paid for by the Clintons. The whole thing was fake. None of it was true. Same with the Ukraine phone call, that they said that they were gonna, they had irrefutable evidence that this phone call was illegal. I can't remember the term that they used, but again, we could see all of this happening. They continued to go after Trump. We could see that this was political games, and it was so blatantly obvious to so many of us that we could see that this was purely political, that they were truly just going after this man because they hate him so much, because he didn't answer to them, and we just assumed everybody else was going to see it too. And a lot of people didn't, despite the fact that it's even now been proven to be completely false. So we're like, okay. Then the pandemic came. And this is not to say that the pandemic wasn't serious. I think it's easy to say now that we never should have shut things down. We never should have done this or that. At the time, I think, we all had a lot of questions. We weren't really sure what the right approach should be. That being said, it became very clear very early on that there were so many decisions made that were political, that this was, again, another tool to go after Trump, despite the data and the statistics and the evidence pointing to exactly who was more vulnerable and who wasn't, who was more at risk and who wasn't, who we should focus our efforts on to keep them safe and healthy, and who was probably going to be okay if they continued to keep society functioning, essentially. Despite all of this, the political game was treat everybody like we're all going to die and keep everything locked down and destroy the economy and destroy people's lives, and then make Trump look bad. So again, we just assumed people are going to see this for what it is. People are going to see the power grabs. People are going to see who the real dictators are. People are going to see who the real authoritarians are that really want to take over their lives and ruin everything for them, who are actually in real time ruining their entire lives. Didn't seem to work very well. And then the riots happened. And we saw that governors who had the power at their fingertips to stop these riots, to put their foot down, to hold people accountable for their destruction, that they refused to do so. And not only that, they let millions of innocent people suffer the loss of life, loss of livelihoods. They let this go on for days and days and weeks and months. They had the power to stop it. Looting, anarchy, arson, and they did absolutely nothing about it. Not only that, they said the National Guard is not welcome here to come and stop this. And we thought, okay, people are going to see it now. They're going to open their eyes. They're going to see these people for who they are. And they didn't. And we just assume people are going to recognize this is not about Republicans versus Democrats. It's about the fact that the Democrat Party has been hijacked by these far left people that are clearly lose no sleep at night, completely destroying their livelihoods and destroying their cities. They're going to see this for what it is, and there's no way that they would vote for this. There's no way they would vote to keep people in office who are so clearly destroying everything around them. And that didn't happen. And then we're like, okay, we've told you what's going to happen if Biden gets into office, that gas prices are going to skyrocket, that, the border's going to be open. Everybody in the country that wants to come into our country is just going to have to, going to have access essentially through our southern border. That's going to embolden the drug cartels. It's going to skyrocket human trafficking. It's going to make things just so much more dangerous for our country. We said all of these things that were going to happen, when Biden said that he was going to stop drilling and, shut down the Keystone Pipeline. We're like, gas prices are going to skyrocket. This man is interested in destroying our country. And we're like, okay, we're telling you all these things are going to happen. You don't believe us. I guess some people have to learn the hard way. We just assumed that after 2 years, that people would see what is happening right in front of them. That they would see gas prices and inflation and crime and fentanyl and sexualization of kids and the targeting of family rights and parental rights and name it, everything that has happened. I mean, need we, point our fingers back to the withdrawal of Afghanistan, which still to this day just American citizens were left at the hands of terrorists to be hunted by terrorists. And we still to this day don't have a number about how many people were left there. And we said to ourselves, people are going to smarten up. They're going to learn the hard way. We're going to have a couple of rough years. Finally, they're going to see that this party does not care about them. And that, under the struggle of even being able to access the most basic needs and afford the most basic needs, people are going to wake up. Yet, as we saw with the midterm elections last night, that didn't happen. Again, I think we just assumed after all of this, all of these times that we have assumed that people are going to open their eyes and they're going to wake up, and there's no way that they would continue to vote themselves into this mess, that we're like, okay, they've had this opportunity, they're going to wake up. It's not happening. We keep giving people the benefit of the doubt. We keep assuming that there's no way that people would vote to continue living in crime. There's no way that they would vote against their own safety. There's no way that they would vote to continue living in squalor. That despite the blatant and unapologetic hypocrisy that the left blatantly demonstrates on a daily basis, that there's no way that they would continue to support that. I mean, remember, no one is above the law, according to the left, except for criminals who want to assault and murder people, or the millions of people who want to cross our border, or if you want to be a grown adult that dances provocatively in front of kids. Remember, believe all women, except if you're Tara Reid, a woman that's been sniffed or touched by Joe Biden, a woman who's been assaulted in a bathroom because of policies that allow biological men into the private spaces that women should only be allowed into, or if you're a woman who's just been brutalized just trying to get to work. They claim to condemn political violence while people from their base consistently attack and assault people on the other side of the aisle. There are numerous examples of this hypocrisy, and you can point them out all day long, and we're like, people are going to care, and yet they don't. My point is this. The reason I bring up the idea that the left is better at messaging is because their effective messaging of the past is the reason for where we are now. Remember not long ago when we'd be on Facebook and someone would post, if you supported Trump, you can unfriend me now. And we all just kind of laughed and rolled our eyes because that's stupid. Well, I think it kind of started with that. I think that was kind of the first taste of it. These people were already taken in by that messaging, the consistent drumbeat of Republicans hate gay people, Republicans want to force religion on everyone, Republicans are racist, whatever it is. None of these things are true, of course, but we could see it starting, and we could see them taking these little pieces of information, like a lot of people, being Christian conservatives, and just kind of the biblical teachings of men and women being, the unions ordained by God, the marriage ordained by God, that, the Bible doesn't support gay marriage. And I know there's been a lot of interpretations of the Bible, but anyway, taking that little piece of information and applying it to literally every possible LGBTQ issue, taking that piece and saying, they hate gay people, they hate trans people, they hate queer people. They, now that we want to influence your kid to be trans, they're not safe for these kids now. Just like I said, taking a small issue and exploding it. And these are the same people who went from that to the fact that just a few years later, they didn't miss a beat when they said, I hope that Republicans get COVID and die. Or if a Republican did get COVID, they were like wishing death upon them. They have completely changed the meaning of words to say that if you don't want to segregate dorms or pass laws that favor a certain skin color, you're the racist. If you don't admit to your white privilege simply because of your skin color, then you're the white supremacist. If you don't want your kids to read porn in schools, then you're the hateful, bigoted, oppressive, unreasonable, Bible-thumping phobic. All this to say, we assumed that after everything that's happened, everything that people have been able to see with their own eyes, that these people would have a breaking point. That, we assume they would open their eyes and wake up at some point, but they've got to have a boundary. They've got to have a limit. There's got to be a line in the sand that they are not willing to cross. There must be something. And I think it's time that we come to terms with the fact that we're dealing with a group of people with a belief system, with a cult, if you will. I know they like to call us a cult, so why not? We can use that word too. The fact that we're dealing with an ideology where there is no line. There's no line, there's no boundary, there's no line in the sand that exists. There's nothing that they won't do, that they won't accept. And I mean, the first clue, of course, should have been, and should always have been, the fact that they refuse to acknowledge the legitimate, it is indisputable, irrefutable fact that a baby in the womb is a human being. This science was settled decades and decades and decades ago. It's a human, it's a person, it's not a clump of cells, it's not a black hole. It doesn't switch from being a blob to a human depending on if you want it or not, and there's no magical portal that the baby goes through in the birth canal where they turn into a human on their way out. Like, it just doesn't happen. So if we thought lawlessness was their line, it's not. If we thought hypocrisy was the line, it's not. If we thought being blatantly and openly lied to was their line, we were wrong. And if being led down the path where your little ones are now being sexualized by grown adults and your beautiful sons and daughters are having their perfectly healthy body parts cut off while you hand them over to face a lifetime of sterilization and mutilation, not even caring about the endless possibilities of devastating effects they could face both mentally and physically, if that is not your line, there never will be a line. The left believes in nothing at all. And to demonstrate this, I want to show you a video that I came across recently that just illustrates this point perfectly. An account I follow on Twitter is from a guy named Billboard Chris. I think he lives in Canada, but he goes around to a lot of the major cities in Canada and the US and stands outside with a billboard that says, "Children cannot consent to puberty blockers." And of course, this sign sparks conversations with people. And of course, it sparks a lot of unprovoked violence against him as well. He's posted numerous videos of being physically attacked and verbally berated, from the party of love and tolerance. Anyway, he was out on the street. And now I don't know if this was at an event or what exactly was happening before this. But just as a side note, Chloe Cole was within the vicinity of him somewhere. And if you don't know who Chloe Cole is, she's a young woman who was taken in by gender ideology as a young teenage girl. She took hormones. I'm not sure if she took puberty blockers, but she was influenced to the point that she did have her breasts removed at the age of 15. She is now a detransitioner, and she bravely goes out speaking publicly about her experience and using her voice to create awareness about the predatory practices of gender-affirming care, and in hopes of hopefully preventing other teens of going through the same thing. So in this video, you see that Chris and another Instagram influencer who does street interviews speaking with this guy about these issues, and it appears as though this person that they're talking to really thinks that he is standing for something. He really thinks that he is advocating for something honorable, who truly believes, at least in this particular moment, that he's truly convicted in his position, that he is adamantly arguing that these surgeries are not happening to anybody under the age of 18. And it would lead one to believe that this means he is fighting to protect minor children.
They're not doing surgeries on
all
kids
the studies
who
we
are
have
under
in
18.
this.
You can't.
Yes,
No,
they
they're
are.
not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not. There is no
What's your
doctor
basis
in
for saying that?
the law. There's no doctor in the United States who will give you who will do an irreversible surgery under the age of 18. That's just not true.
Chloe Cole is across the street. She had her breast cut off at 15. Do you want to come talk to her?
Mastectomy is... That's
You want to come talk to her?
Was it for cancer or was
No,
it for
gender?
That's not true.
Come talk to her.
No.
I've got video from Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, where the doctor is admitting that the youngest patient they've cut the breasts off of is 12 years old. It's on video, my friend.
I'm willing to bet you right now that that's an edited video where the doctor was talking about how the person had cancer, breast cancer, and had to cut it off.
All right, so this is a video by Boston Children's Hospital.
In the United States. For top surgery, you are requested, but not required, to have been on gender-affirming hormones for at least a year. Many surgical centers require you to be 18 for top surgeries. We'll see people as young as age 15 if they've been affirmed in their gender for a long period of time. And
so as we can see, at first, he doesn't believe it's happening at all. So does that mean he would be against it if it were? Because it seems like his immediate reaction to even the idea of a minor making a permanent decision like this is too far for him, that would be his line. That might be his line in the sand. And of course, Billboard Chris points out, well, he points to this actual person, Chloe Cole, who is within mere feet of him and says, this is what actually happened to her at the age of 15. So now this person is faced with the reality that, hey, this is actually happening, but he doesn't want to talk to the person that it happened to. So that's the first immediate shift. He thinks he's convicted in his belief system, and then he's 100% proven wrong. And, now he has a new belief system, and, and he can't talk to people that don't align with that narrative, with that new belief system. And then the clip goes on.
Well, you said it's not happening, so it is, though, right? Okay, so we're going to acknowledge that?
Yeah, I was incorrect about that for sure.
What else do you think you might be incorrect about?
Well, I'm sure plenty of things.
You were very confident about that 2 minutes ago.
Yeah, and like any reasonable person, I can say.
So now, do you believe that they cut off the breast of a 12-year-old at Kaiser Permanente, or do I need to show you that video too?
Were they affirming to their chosen gender for a long time? The way they said they have to be in that video?
Well, they don't have to be. They request it.
That's it, as long as they have been.
No, in fact, you can get these letters of approval for surgery over the phone. There was a Pride Festival in Madison, Wisconsin a few weeks ago. Someone set up a tent with a sandwich board saying trans or non-binary, free letters of recommendation for surgery. You can just walk up to the tent, get your letter for surgery that you need. Do you think that's the level of safeguarding we need for a lot of these kids who are struggling with other mental health comorbidities?
If they want to transition, then yeah.
Okay, so a second ago it wasn't happening. Now you acknowledge that it is happening and it's totally fine if there's no safeguards.
So at least he admits he's wrong. And then he stands his ground in saying that he agrees with the safeguards of having someone, that a kid has, that a teenager has to have lived as the opposite gender for a long period of time, whatever that means, before being given this letter of approval to proceed with other treatments. And then, Chris points out, well, it's really not difficult to get this letter. And so this guy, in the same conversation, he sets a new belief system, and then he's proven wrong again. Again, that the letters are easy to get, that the standard of living to be the opposite gender doesn't have to be a certain length of time, and that the letter is a suggestion, not a requirement. So he's proven wrong again. And then now he has to admit that children under the age of 18 can get permanent surgeries to remove healthy body parts, that they don't need any kind of significant medical approval to go through with it, and he's now okay with the fact that there's no safeguards at all. So he started out in this one spot saying he's fine if there's an age limit in place. Then he had to switch and say that he'd be fine as long as there were the safeguards such as length of time lived as the opposite gender, or before really going through with it. And then, of course, he tried to throw the cancer thing in there as another safeguard that, of course they should be allowed to if they're medically ill and it's medically necessary, as a safeguard. And then, at the end of the day, his entire belief system fell apart. He tried to pretend that he had conviction for something, that he stood for something. And when faced with the decision to actually stand for that thing, he made the choice not to. He realized he has no principles, he has no limits or boundaries at all, and that he could let go of it all very easily and felt totally comfortable at the end of the day, not holding on to anything at all. And abortion activists do this too. Every single time I have a conversation with somebody who is pro-abortion, the first argument they bring up all the time is the need for cases of rape and incest, for girls that have been sexually abused need access to abortion, even though statistically pregnancies from rape and incest are exceedingly rare, and abortions from those instances are even more rare, and they only make up less than 1% of the reason that women access abortions, but they are the first reason that every single pro-abortion person cites. But if you say to them, okay, well, if there are exceptions for rape and incest, will you support restrictions on abortion? Every single time they say no. So it blows my mind. It's like, why bring it up at all? Why bring up these safeguards? Why bring up these limitations that you claim to have if it really doesn't make a difference? And at the end of the day, you really do support abortion at any time, at any stage, for any reason, and society doesn't get to say anything about it. It's the same with people who pretend to have a moral position when it comes to gender affirming care for children. So many of them, I have seen so many videos of people trying to say that these surgeries on kids that's not happening on kids under the age of 18, while simultaneously I will see numerous pictures every single day of teenagers under the age of 18 where this is happening. So I think that they, try and establish this position to make it sound like they stand for something and that they actually do have some kind of core value or core principles. But then when faced with it, it takes nothing at all to knock it over completely, and they have no problem with it. And I think that's the biggest thing. There's no hesitation whatsoever. I know this is extremely long-winded, but I do have a point. This is at the core of where we are now. We are constantly trying to work with people who have no core values, who have no fundamental sense of right or wrong, who do not see any reason to stand for anything at all. If you said to them, do you think it's important to have a candidate in office who, or a representative in office who is of sound mind and can articulate their thoughts and decisions clearly? Of course, immediately they'd say yes. But when it obviously came down to putting that into practice, putting that into action and standing for that position, there was no hesitancy at all to flip that position faster than a wet sock. If you said to them, do you think it's important to have representatives in office that put people who commit crimes behind bars for assaulting innocent people, for stealing cars or for looting stores? They'd say, yes, of course, I stand for that. But when asked to put that into practice, when it comes right down to that vote, they've been so taken in by the idea that the right is dangerous and that Republicans are a threat, they have no problem abandoning that belief system or that position and voting for someone they know is going to let criminals back on the street, who won't prosecute people for looting or for car theft. If you said to them, do you think that it's important to have representatives in office who abide by the same laws that they impose on their constituents? Of course they'd say yes. But when their officials lock them down, while the officials themselves go to parties and host gatherings with their own friends and family, and they travel, and these people can see the undeniable fact that their officials have no problem inflicting rules on them that they themselves don't abide by, and yet they still don't hesitate to vote for that person, despite being lied to and treated pretty much like a peasant, there's no belief system there. And we see this over and over and over and over again. And my point is, we have got to stop running campaigns and running political messages like we are talking to people who rely on conviction, who rely on logic, who rely on facts, who rely on honesty and reality. And we've got to stop operating in a way where we're trying not to offend them with our conviction, with our logic and our facts and our honesty. We've got to stop treading lightly, stop worrying about being called names, stop worrying about being censored or silenced. We have to stop running campaigns and choosing candidates and making decisions based on the idea that we're afraid of how the other side is going to react, and we need to start making decisions and start running campaigns and start choosing candidates and essentially do everything the way that Ron DeSantis and Carrie Lake do them. Ron DeSantis especially, he doesn't tiptoe around anything. He is a man with conviction. He stands firm in his allegiance to the Constitution. He operates within the confines of his power of office. He makes decisions. He gets crap done. And he does not worry about anything that the other side says. He never tries to appease a side of people who have no conviction whatsoever. And if we are ever going to have this red wave that we were expecting last night, or to even make a red splash of any kind at any point in the future, we have got to change our mindset. We need more Ron DeSantis's and Carrie Lakes and more fearless contenders like Lee Zeldin and Tudor Dixon. People who are unapologetically patriotic and unapologetically American. The only way that we are going to be able to teach a generation of kids and teens and young adults who have spent years in the public education system that has worked to create a generation without conviction is to show them what it looks like. Stop blaming and get crap done. Stop pointing fingers and do your job. Step out and be the example that people need. That's why Ron DeSantis has been successful in turning what used to be kind of a purple state into essentially a red blaze of conservatism. He's been all action. He says what he needs to say, when he needs to say it, and then he just does. He just acts. He is conservatism. He is Americanism. And that's what we need. Stop worrying about people who don't believe in anything, who can so easily be flipped and manipulated at the drop of a hat, who are so dedicated to their partisanship, who are not interested even in their own well-being and safety and their own freedom and liberty, that can be used and abused and locked down while they see their own leaders go out and not abide by the rules. These are not people that we need to be worrying about and that we need to be trying to please and trying to cater to whatsoever. We have got to stand up and be unapologetic about who we are, to not give in to any of these woke policies, any of these things that are destroying our country, and not apologize for it and not hesitate to shut those things down and to set an example, an actual physical, living, active example of what it means to be an American, to be a patriot, and to love this country. I know this was a really long one. My throat is really, really, really sore. So let me know what your thoughts are.